Welcome back to The Critique. Today, we're looking at a YouTube discussion on Christian Zionism, this idea of Israel's stolen identity and the rise of anti-Jewish sentiment we're seeing in the church.
And it's tackling some huge theological ideas. I mean, the core argument is that if you get the definition of Israel wrong, a word that's in the Bible, over 2,500 times, you're basically misunderstanding the entire thing.
It's a powerful premise, and that actually brings us right to our first point. To really maximize the persuasive power of these arguments, which are, pretty complex, the dialogue has to ruthlessly prioritize that core idea of the identity shift over long personal stories.
Right. The biggest challenge I see in the current cut is that this foundational argument, the idea that the institutional church just got it wrong for centuries by changing Israel's definition, it keeps getting delayed.
It gets diluted, doesn't it?
Totally. It's diluted by these, warm and conversational tangents right at the top.
The weakness isn't the stories themselves. I mean, they're interesting, but their placement is the issue. When the host kicks off with that long story about only reading a third of a book in high school.
And then reading 80 books in 2 years.
Exactly. And then you have the personal shout-outs to the co-author, to his mom. It just breaks the momentum. People are tuning in for this big reveal about an 1,800-year-old error.
And instead, they're getting biographical data that really isn't essential for the hook.
You're forcing the listener to wait way too long for that big reveal.
You are. The goal here is a radical shift in thinking, and you want that intellectual dopamine hit right away.
So wait, are we saying to cut the personal narrative completely? I mean, isn't that authentic connection a big part of what works on YouTube? How do you balance that momentum with rapport?
Oh, you don't cut it. You integrate it. The suggestion is to hit them with the central thesis immediately, right after the intro. And then you weave in the personal context only as direct support for the primary argument.
So the story becomes about finding the true Israel.
Exactly. It's evidence for the intellectual journey, not just a general background story.
That makes sense. It keeps the momentum, but also the humanity of the host. And we definitely have to keep that incredible historical timeline of Israel's governance.
Oh, absolutely. That section from Abraham, Egypt, the judges, the kingdoms, all the way to the British Mandate, that is essential.
It's the objective proof.
It is. It proves the difference between God's divine possession and just temporary human occupancy. You have to keep that.
So let's make that concrete. Actionable steps for the edit.
Okay, first,
Pivot immediately from your intro to that core thesis on identity theft. Just hit the listener. If you get the definition of Israel wrong, you get the entire Bible wrong. Boom.
start with the bombshell.
Start with the bombshell. Second, weave in the author's personal story. Born in Texas, Jewish parents, following Yeshua. Weave that directly into the discussion of how he found this true definition. Frame it as an intellectual rescue mission.
Not just biography. Not just biography. And third, you have to feature that historical breakdown more prominently. I mean, it's a masterclass of the biblical timeline. Maybe even frame it as its own, tightly scripted, narrated interlude. It proves the argument without any anecdote at all.
Okay, so we've got the structure. Now let's dig into the history itself. You're arguing that this identity theft idea is a really powerful hook, but that it needs a more urgent frame.
It does. The concept of identity theft is a powerful narrative hook, but its historical breakdown should be streamlined to maintain narrative urgency by centering on the intentionality of key theological shifts.
The host makes the point that the institutional church has been, what's the quote, run by a theology and theologians that have gotten it wrong for basically 1,800 years.
A huge claim. And the weakness here is that the deep dive, while correct, can start to feel a bit too academic for a wider audience. The discussion on the nuance of all the different covenants, for instance, it's important, but it can dilute the main point.
It risks losing momentum.
Right. The audience is there because they want to understand modern anti-Zionism. So if the academic bits aren't immediately tied to the current problem, like the psychological damage of calling the Tanakh the Old Testament, you can lose them.
And the other historical detail, like the Romans renaming Judea to Palestine or Jerusalem to Ilia Capitolina.
Fascinating proof points. But they delay the connection to the conflict people are seeing on their phones today. We have to move past just historical curiosity.
So the details are good, but they need to be repositioned to serve that main thesis of identity theft causing a current-day error. The audience needs to feel the immediate consequences.
Exactly. The suggestion is to frame the historical data, especially the language shifts, as definitive evidence of institutional bias, not just some kind of scholarly mistake.
Make it feel intentional.
Yes, and directly connect the definition of Israel, a nation God created, not just in ethnicity, to the unconditional Abrahamic covenant. Show exactly how that Old Testament label works right now to try and nullify God's promises.
So if we're making the history proof of bias, what's the one textual moment that has to be front and center?
You need sharp, quick connections that show the mechanism of the error. So first, right after you talk about stolen identity, you detail how the Latin Vulgate Jerome's 4th century translation codified the split into Old and New Testaments.
That's the moment it became textual.
That is the moment the error was cemented into the inheritance of the entire Western Church. It's the smoking gun.
And for the average person in the pews, that textual separation is really where the theft began to take root.
It's everything. Second, when you discuss the covenants, you have to focus sharply on the contrast. The term Old Covenant just completely ignores that the Abrahamic covenant is, unilateral and unconditional.
And still active.
It's still going strong today, which makes the term Old Testament logically absurd. It's proof of the error. And third, right after that historical timeline, you have to use the host's brilliant analogy.
The ownership versus possession one.
Yes, you can leave your house, but if you got the deed, it's your house. That analogy just lands so powerfully. It clarifies everything about God's promise of the land and gives the listener an easy way to explain it to someone else.
That's a huge lift for the argument, and the material does pivot really well from there to the contemporary challenge. The host points out that people in, solid conservative churches are being swayed by big media figures.
And it's leading them to question Israel's morality, even believe claims of genocide. And you can hear the pain in the host's voice when he says, "It hurts my heart."
He's defined the problem and the emotional stakes perfect.
He has. And since the goal is to equip believers to fight this, the practical apologetics need to be structured like a clear field guide for these modern confrontations.
I think that's the biggest missed opportunity right now. The way the field examples are structured. I mean, those stories from direct confrontations, the student at UVU, the guy at the seminary conference, they are so powerful.
So powerful.
But they're delivered as anecdotes, kind of late in the piece, and they feel a bit unstructured. They're great stories, but they haven't been turned into, repeatable tactics for the listener.
We have to elevate them from stories into a strategy.
Exactly. The suggestion is to structure the practical application section much earlier. Move directly from the theological definition of identity theft to the tactical defense of it. Give the listener practical advice they can use tomorrow. So if we're building a field guide, what should the balance be? How much time on deep theology versus, real-time social media style debunking? People need tools for that next uncomfortable conversation.
It's got to be heavily weighted toward those immediate tactical responses. We can structure this into, say, 4 clear steps. We have to focus on how to deliver the counterargument.
Okay, let's lay it out. Tactic 1, building on that theology.
Tactic 1, create a specific section called Countering False Witness. Use the 9th commandment, the fact that God hates lying, as the immediate spiritual foundation.
So you elevate it beyond politics.
Immediately, it becomes about the moral weight of Torah. Tactic 2, use that case study of the seminary attendee, the guy who said, "You're calling all of us believers Nazis." Use that to show how you confront the spiritual implications of bearing false witness against other believers in Yeshua.
You make him confront the personal cost of their words.
You force them to. And for tactic 3, we get into verification, which is where that UVU student story is so critical.
Right.
Correct. Tactic 3 is all about factual verification. The actionable advice is demand evidence. Verify the source and the language. Basically a prove-it challenge, like the witnesses required in Torah.
And you highlight that incredible detail the host uncovered.
You have to. What these videos were. This was video footage that was live-streamed from Hamas. They're speaking Arabic, and they're murdering people. The tactic is to force the other person to defend their propaganda, not just their opinion.
Which moves the whole thing away from feelings and onto verifiable facts. What about the final foundational piece, the language itself?
That's tactic 4, and it builds on that profound insight about the confusion between ethnicity and nation. You have to stress the actionable need for the audience to learn basic biblical language, even just 101 level.
Know the difference between Yahweh and Adonai.
Yes, replace Jesus with Yeshua. The host says the truth shall set you free, and this is the most powerful proactive step they can offer. It's about fighting a stolen identity with primary source term. You're giving the average person the tools of a scholar.
This is just such an insightful and vital conversation. The expertise in the material really is clear. So to summarize, the 3 key actionable ways to maximize the impact.
First, focus the frame. You need to edit for just ruthless clarity. Link that identity theft thesis to the current political climate immediately. Cut the tangential anecdotes and highlight that difference between possession and occupancy all within the first minute.
Second, activate the history. You have to treat that historical account, like Jerome's Vulgate translation, as the definitive proof of 1,800 years of institutional error. That gives the history real urgency and relevance for today.
And finally, build the field guide. You have to structure those fantastic contemporary apologetics insights, demanding witnesses, verifying video sources, into clear, tactical steps. Give people an immediate, actionable resource for when they face this stuff in their own communities.
This material is essential. We really do encourage you to refine the discussion flow based on these suggestions, and please submit your updated material for a deeper critique.